Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm actually doing one by request. One of the viewers who saw my Daiwa 9000C rebuild had called in and asked if I could do, if the GS9 was the same as the 9000C, and the basic answer is yes. But I just happen to have one in the shop, so I thought, why not take this one apart for those of you that have this reel, and show you how it works and how to lube it and maintain it and put it back into service and get you going fishing again. This is a large reel. It has a capacity of about 300 yards of 30-pound monofilament. It's meant for sea or deep lake fishing, and it's a classic reel, 2-ball bearing, that if well maintained can last a lifetime. It really is highly engineered and built. So I start, first I start with the latex glove. As many of you may know on my videos, I like to keep the contaminations off my hands if possible. But I start by removing the handle and the handle nut that's on the side plate, and then I'm going to just put that nut right back onto the handle so I don't lose it. And I'm going to put that handle into a parts tray so that I keep track of all those small pieces and parts, so that when it comes to reassembly, I know where it is. Next up is the side plate screws. They're a Phillips head. You could actually use a flat-bladed screwdriver on these if you wanted to, because there is a through slot on those screws, but if it's a Phillips head, I'm going to go use a Phillips head. And so some people ask, should I use a battery-powered screwdriver? Does it matter? So the answer is go ahead if you're comfortable with that, particularly when you disassemble a reel, not a problem. A lot of these things now are not threaded screws like this. They're a coarse screw that just goes into a graphite side. I worry about them a little bit with stripping that screw on a high power. I also worry on reinstalling these that there's a problem with possibly over-torquing and cracking the case. So this came out together here. That's interestingly enough. But there's a side plate comes off, then you have the side plate bearing, and then you have the back end of the assembly, which is the main drive gear. And then this one actually came out in two pieces. This is the bushing that goes in the other side plate. This is the crosswind gear that sits on that that shaft to make the spool go up and down. So that all came back together, but no harm, no foul. Good time to tell you, if you're not familiar with reels like these, then take pictures along the way so that you know, okay? So I'm going to just go put that bearing back in there, and I'm going to inspect my main drive, make sure that all of the teeth are there and not bent or worn. I look at it first this way, and then secondly I look at it this way to make sure that it's uniform in the every tooth is the right way. I do the same thing on the bottom piece, which drives that crosswind gear, which makes your spool go up and down. And in this case, we got a bearing on the side. It's a 2-bearing reel. This is on the drive side. I make sure that that spins free and easily. And since this is a maintenance video, I'm going to take a piece time out of this to oil it. I use a Reelex oil, which is made for fishing reels. A 3-in-1 oil, I guess, would work. Any general purpose machine oil would work as well. And then just work it in a little bit by spinning it. On the back side of it, this is clean, but if I needed to clean it a little bit more, a paper towel or a Q-tip, I could get any surplus grease off of that. And then I just put a light coating of blue grease onto that. And in this case, I use a pen reel grease, but there's others on the market. It seems like almost every manufacturer has that out there. So, and as well as third-party products, right? So just a little bit on that. And then we're going to go take the spool off and show you how to maintain the back piece of this. The spool comes off with another Phillips head screw holding in the crosswind block. I think I got that out. And so you just hold the crosswind block and just pull the spool up, and that's how the spool comes out. You don't have to take the spool off in order to gain access to this. At this point in time, if this reel was dirty, you could go in with Q-tips and clean out some of the excess grease. In this case, it's not dirty. I'm going to take this crosswind block off just to show you the assembly behind it. So there's a crosswind gear right behind it that's held in with a screw, and there's a little bushing on the stud here. So be careful as you take these reels apart not to lose that little bushing there. It'll just cause wobble. There you go. It'll just cause wobble in your spool and underperformance of the reel. This is clean up top here, so I'm just going to take, again, a little bit of blue grease and put it onto the pinion gear. And when you have this apart, you're going to see the quality of this reel. I mean, you just do not see gearing like this in the new reels. Okay, then I'm going to reinstall this. This sits over that stud and under the anti-reverse dog portion. And then we're going to go put the bushings back in. I like to put the main gear in. In this case, most of the time when you're working on reels, the main gear cannot come out because of the clearance between the crosswind gear on the back side and the front. So as a habit, I like to just put this in at this point, make sure it gets merged in with that crosswind gear below. I've seated the crosswind block low so that I have access to it. And then we're going to go put that gear shaft back in. Before we do that, let's go up top for a moment, show you what's up there. I use an offset wrench. That takes the rotor nut off. There's a little tensioner washer. And then there's what I call a keyway. There's probably a different name for it, but there's a thicker piece of metal with a slot in it on the rotor. That also comes off, and that gives you your rotor assembly. I check underneath to make sure that there's no contaminants. There's not. Then we have access to the pinion gear and the bearing. So this bearing needs to be lubricated. Again, back to that reel oil, the Reel X, and just a little bit on that is plenty. If you needed to pull this out, the 3 Phillips head screws there, remove that, and this collar would be there, and then you could pull that off of that. It's a good time here to check that the anti-reverse lever works. It does, and as a hint for reinstalling, you want the anti-reverse lever out so that you can reinstall the rotor. Okay, so that's good. We're going to go put this back in. We're going to go take that notched washer. And again, if you're uncomfortable with any of these procedures, take pictures along the way. There's also a manufacturer's schematic usually available for some of these reels. Some are a little bit too old, but a lot of times you can go onto a website and get a manufacturer's schematic, which will give you a burst of how these reels work. Okay, and then the crosswind block fell out, which is probably telling me I probably should have put some lubrication in there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that at this point. Not too much again. Too much tends to make it jam, grab contaminants, and so on. Okay, so just making sure that we've got that properly seated. We do. Okay, and then we're going to go reinstall that spool shaft. And I remembered that hook was facing me when I took this out. There's a little hook that rides in here. And again, pictures work well. And then we're going to go reinstall this barrier screw. And we're going to go put that side plate back on. This servicing is done. So we've serviced the crosswind gear, we've serviced the block, we've lubricated the main pinion gear, we've lubricated the bearing, we've got it all seated properly. We're going to put the side plate back on. We're going to go into our parts bucket to get the 3 screws. I'm going to go put them back on. And again, this is the part I would caution you, don't use the high-powered battery screwdriver. Probably asking for trouble there in terms of over torquing and then winding up with a warped side plate or a broken side plate if it happens to be a plastic reel or along that lines. Okay, so that's the That's the main way to lubricate one of these reels. I'll just take another minute or two and I'll show you the drag surface up top as soon as I get these last two screws in place and the handle on. And make sure it's operational. And it kind of sounds funny to make sure it's operational, but as long as I've been doing these, you still, you forget a piece along the way and all of a sudden you've got to grind, or the reel just isn't turning the way it should. And then we'll just spin it. That's working fine. Take that handle nut off. Reinsert the handle into the side plate. Reinsert the handle nut on the other side. That's a flat-headed screw, so we're going to go ahead and tighten that up. And then we're going to go pull that spool for the final piece, which is the drag surface. So spool comes off by counterclockwise on the drag nut. Drag nut goes right into the parts bin. Almost universally, spinning reels have this type of an assembly where there's a spring tensioner with the drags underneath. That spring comes off into the parts bucket, and you work the drags out of there, usually with a screwdriver. Most of the time these will be either felt or they'll be, in this case they're felt or Teflon drags. These got plenty of lubrication on them, but they are a little bit pressed down. So in this case, you just want to clean them up. And this is a commercial for what not to do in terms of keeping your drag tight when you're not fishing your reel. If you keep it tight, there's a chance that these things will kind of weld themselves on, get themselves sticky here. And then what you want to do on the felt ones is you want to use a drag grease. In this case, I use Cal's. Just a little bit of drag grease on those open felt washers and you'll be fine. Just kind of a little bit here and a little bit there. Okay, and then we reassemble. So felt washer goes in first. Whoops, I'm going to clean that inside of this. There's some grime in there, so paper towel can wipe that out. This one I didn't get enough lube on, so I'm going to go ahead and put more on that. Sides. All right, so we go in with that. And I remembered the order of these. If you didn't remember the order, it goes felt and then it goes metal. Second felt, one with the ears, which has the indentation set on the spool. Last of the felts, top one, and then the retaining spring. And I always put my finger on that retaining spring because it is a tight tension spring, and springs being springs can pop. So right now I'm working this to get this into the groove. There we go. And that you want to make sure that it snaps in properly. This one is giving me a little bit of an issue here. I'm going to take that out again. Okay, now we got it. All right, so that's the way it came back in. It goes back on the reel. And we grab the drag knob. This time it's clockwise. Tighten it down to make sure that you've got the right tension on the drag that you're looking for. Again, with big fish, you want to leave some play in the drag. Okay, and then since it's not going to be fished for a while, I do back it off. Okay, there we go. There's the completed Daiwa GS9 ready to go fishing. All right, I hope that's helped. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. If you liked the video, please indicate it with a like on the YouTube page. If you'd like to see more of these, please subscribe, and I'll be happy to show you all the reels and projects I'm working on. Thanks again for viewing.